Hey, welcome back to another episode of Armchair Architects. So, have you ever heard people say that architects are like in the ivory tower? Today, we're going to talk about the relationship of architects and the rest of the organization. I know it's something that people are really interested in discussing. My recommendation is to watch this video, check out the links below, subscribe, and let's get into the conversation. Let's talk to our architects. Well, hey, Uli. Hey, Eric. Welcome back again. I think this is the video we're going to do in which people are going to come after us with pitchforks and torches. That's my best guess because we're about to really be, I don't know if controversial, at least poking things with sharp sticks. The thing that I was hoping we'd talk about that seems to come up and people are bringing to us is this notion about like what are the roles. What's the relationship of the architects themselves to like the rest of the organization? And in some ways, like a way that I've heard us talk about it before is like architects versus the ivory tower. Like people have this notion that architects are sitting up in the stone castle, you know, or I guess it's the ivory tower.
The ivory tower. Right?
I guess it's Well, where did that come from? Are in the ivory tower, and every once in a while they speak something. They speak great wisdom, and that wisdom is expected to go down. And lo, the peasants are grateful to get that wisdom and to go off and do whatever it is. So, can we talk a little bit about like the ivory tower? I mean, is that really what people think? Is that really the stereotype people have out in the world? And then where does that come from? Where does that stereotype come from?
It's a great question. And Uli, maybe I'll the best way I think to prevent people from coming after us with pitchforks and torches is to talk about your own failures. So Uli, I'll go first and tell my whole journey in this area, and maybe that'll answer the question, David. So a while ago, here and other places, the best thing to do was to gather a whole group of really talented architects, think of them as like chefs, and put them in the same kitchen and say, if we just funnel all of the organization's problems through this center of excellence or this center of competency, only high quality stuff will come out. And what we didn't realize at the time is that we were super happy to be there. So early in career, Eric was like, wow, look at the people that I'm around. This is amazing. Early in career, Eric was like, okay, as this thing comes through, I'm going to actually put my stamp on this and try to be as collaborative as possible. The challenge became when we had other members of the Center of Excellence saying, hey, don't paint the picture that way. Put a mustache on that Mona Lisa. She'll look a lot better. And I'm like, no mustaches on the Mona Lisa. This is how the picture must be painted. And so you slowly begin to realize that a center of competence or center of excellence is basically like trying to paint a picture with where everybody has a brush or too many cooks in the kitchen, whatever your favorite analogy is. And eventually, the way that organization evolves is you become removed from the implementation realities, the timelines, the rules of the road associated with actually doing something meaningful with an architecture or software solution. And the way I term it is like we have to avoid that. We have to avoid occupying the ivory tower, being principal pontificators, hurling lightning bolts of, hey, you're not doing it right. And instead adopt a position of a community servant. I am here to actually help you achieve your goals, not actually criticize and talk to you about, hey, you didn't implement the ambassador principle in the right way.
So surely, well, you cannot disagree with that, right? No lightning bolts?
No, actually, sometimes you do throw lightning bolts, but for not necessarily the reason that you are the smarter person. But part of the reason why sometimes architects, especially enterprise architects, we name the beast a little bit more detailed, are considered ivory tower people is because what Eric said, you're not involved in the real trenches. You don't understand what the pressures are, what the realities are. And you're telling me, use this technology, do it this way, without really having a detailed understanding what the implications of that are. And I think the goal is for a higher level architect is to drive the direction of many efforts. And when you are in the trenches, you always look at the tree and you don't really look at the forest anymore. And so you need this balance between very detailed understanding, but then be able to zoom back out and say, wait a second, are we still on the right path or are we going left where everybody else is going right? And I think that's the complexity that we see when we talk to enterprise architects, for example, that try to drive a direction of investment, of capabilities that we need and so forth, and the individual teams that then have to make the daily decisions. And the only way you can really avoid getting into this complexity of people not liking you or believing you are being just talking and rather than doing is do. And you have to be part of the conversation. And the trick is to be still able to go back and forth, meaning understand the tree, go back and make sure that the tree still fits into the forest and so forth, and also update the enterprise architecture strategy based upon the learning that you have in the trenches. And I think that feedback loop often doesn't happen. And that's why people often think about the Ivory Tower people. Where they say something and it makes sense, but then the reality hits and it doesn't quite make sense anymore. The feedback loop doesn't happen. Then the enterprise architecture doesn't get updated with the real life feedback. And that's why it's drifting apart. And I think that's one of the lessons for me is, yes, it's okay and actually required for you to give a direction and strategy, but then go deep with the team that has to live with these decisions and learn from their detailed conversation. What is it that you actually are trying to do with this stuff? Does this really work? And so forth. So that's the key piece is engage, learn, and alter the overall strategy if it makes sense.
Okay, so I want to say I'm just working here because we seem to have more analogies per square inch in this particular talk than any of our others. So I'm just going to try to figure out, like, is it ivory? Is it a tree? Are we arborists? So let me just see if I can bring this in. Well, the thing that I want to drill slightly deeper into is you talked about, like, okay, so part of the job. Part of the things you can do to not be this, but we've all said, like, here are the things you shouldn't do, which I find to be, as guidance goes, really cool until the point you're like, well, what should I do? So I heard very clearly you say that it's important. An important part of that role is to be, instead of pontificator in charge, iterator in charge. I don't know. I made that up on the fly. I don't know.
Well,
it's probably terrible.
I think what Uli did was he did a really good job of providing the fact that architects have to zoom in and go deep,
right?
Wallow, learn, and then zoom out and say, does this make sense strategically? But I think the way that I approach it, and Uli, I'm curious to see what you think of this, is I'm a part civil servant and I'm a part community organizer. So the civil servant part is being of service to a team that actually has to do something, to launch an app, to write code, to satisfy a business requirement. And part of that is actually getting your hands dirty and not kind of floating above and saying, let me know what you're doing over there. It's more of, how can I help? What kind of help do you need? Here are some of the techniques and things that you might want to think about as you implement it. And then if you do it, here's the context in which it will actually benefit not just you, not just your customers, but the business or all up. And then the community organizer, it really is, hey, I want to actually take what I learned from you. I want to actually tag you in it so that you can actually get the credit and the visibility associated with what I learned, and then help me synthesize and create a diaspora of that knowledge to the rest of the organization. Again, from a servant perspective, I think if I'm successful when teams stand on my shoulders and actually do real stuff in the real world.
Yeah, I would add to this and you are the friendly ball thrower once in a while, because you have to be the person that, based upon your experience, ideally, and customer contact or requirements understanding, keep the team on the right path. Again, I'm doing this on a daily basis where I keep on reminding people, no, the world looks like this. And while we can alter the world a little bit, we still have to respect the basic requirements. And so you can't just make assumptions that you are free to apply an update, for example, into a factory at any point in time. Just push it. That's not going to work. So we need to be smarter than this. And sometimes the people that are building the software get so either excited or so lost that they need the outside input to keep, no, this is north. Let's keep going north here.
I think that's a great point. I consider myself to be a collaborative agitator, hopefully in the best of ways. Sometimes I'm annoying. but it's very purposeful. But in the end, it's all in service of making sure that the rocket ship that team is on actually reaches orbit and doesn't splash back into the ocean. But I also think in terms of, if the warning signs occur when you're starting to explain yourself over and over and over and over again. And that's where a little bit of that, organizational authority that you may have as an architect really becomes to bear. So I don't like the term of throwing lightning bolts. I'm a lot less comfortable with that, but I get Uli's point. Like, you absolutely, at sometimes, if you find yourself explaining to the same people or different people and over again, you kind of have to take the messaging to the next level.
Okay, so I have my final question before we get out of here, because I think this is a really great question that you just backed us into, which is, how do you get people to listen to you? I mean, assuming there isn't like, assuming there isn't some authority who is officially blessing you necessarily, but even then, like, how do you get people to listen to you? I guess is my question for you.
I think there's two ways in which I do it. So the first is you have to kind of realize a couple things. The first is people really want to do a good job. Nobody wants to actually just write something and have that uncomfortable feeling like, I don't know if this is going to work or not, but my name's all over this thing. The second thing is when you're trying to affect change or influence the way in which something's going, you have to realize something that I realized about human nature, which is people don't really make factual decisions most of the time. They make emotional decisions and look for facts to back it up. And the way to get around that is you actually have to be willing to invest the time to help them get into a comfort state where they can listen to your points. If they're not willing to listen to your points, and you might be 100% right, but that's only 50% of the battle. So you really need to get in and get them to a place conversationally or collaboratively where they're really interested in hearing what you have to say, and they're willing to change their own mind. If they're not willing, you have more work to do there. Then secondarily, once you get involved with them, you need to be in the boat with them. You can't necessarily say, all right, that's my opinion, do that, and I'm out of here, and I'll check back with you in like 3 months. It's what can I do to get you here, 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 and here? And again, you might only be one architect among a bunch of projects, but the more you can invest in that area, the better it'll be.
Okay, so Uli, can you close us out with your answer to, like, how do you get people to listen to you?
Yeah, well, I would actually say Eric had says everything that you need to do. I would add two more things. First of all, always bring in potentially external evidence. If you're an internal person like Microsoft architect, make sure that you have the right facts available, customer evidence, and those kind of things, which I think is also true for internal projects. The second thing is, if you cannot reach the people, maybe there are other people that can. So use the influencer model, where you say, hey, Fred, you know these people, you really understand where they're coming from. Here's my concern. Here's what I would like to do. Maybe you can reach them because I can't. I've tried, and so forth. And then at some point in time, you say, you know what? Okay, we agree to disagree. And you either move on, meaning, hey, if it's not your project and you just try to help, you let them say, hey, I can show you the water, you have to drink it. I can't give it to you. And if you are part of the team and you disagree, you then say you commit, although you disagree, and move forward together. And if you can't live with it, you might have to find a new job.
Well, on that sunny note, I mean, I think it's true. It's true. But it's also, yeah, right. That's the problem here. Is it's so very true. But on that note, I think we should talk about some more stuff in the land of, like, what's it like to be an architect, because this seems super cool. I want to thank you, Eric. I want to thank you, Uli, and we'll see you again in another episode of Armchair Architects.